Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Little Acts of Kindness. This will be part 27, chapter 27, entitled The Trouble with Voice Quirks. Shota frowned as he returned to his students after lunch. "Where's Midoriya?" he questioned after the bell rang. "He's in the nurse's office," Yaoyorozu informed. "What happened?" "It was super gross. He was coughing blood," Mineta said, shuddering. "Recovery Girl seems to think it has to do with his quirk," Tokiyami informed. Shota nodded and proceeded to start the lecture on how to behave during the internships. If it had to do with his quirk and Midoriya was coughing blood, then the kid probably decided to fully trust Hizashi. His husband would be pleased, at least. He wrapped up the heroics lecture as the bell rang and the kids left, and Shota made his way to Hizashi's classroom. Poking his head in, he waited for the last stragglers of Hizashi's class to leave. Hizashi smiled at him. Shota just gave a bit of a smirk. "Midoriya apparently has decided you're trustworthy." Hizashi's eyes widened. "What? Wait, is that why he started coughing in class? Because his quirk was kicking in? Where is he now?" "Either still in the nurse's office, or at home resting, most likely." "Let's go check. Besides, he's going to need help with controlling the quirk. Do you remember how much trouble I had?" "Unfortunately," Shota deadpanned. Hizashi gave an offended gasp, slapping him lightly on the arm. "Don't be mean, Sho." He stared blankly for half a minute, creating an awkward moment of silence before he replied. "You nearly deafened the entire class before I joined. They literally had to rebuild the room to be soundproof just for your quirk." Hizashi pouted. The two arrived, and Shuzenji looked at them. "About time you arrived," she huffed. "You were expecting us?" "I sent you to an email before lunch," she said, waving her cane at them. "I didn't check my emails today." "I had a student who needed help and couldn't look," Hizashi answered sheepishly. The old woman grumbled. "I didn't want to risk Midoriya deafening anyone accidentally, so I kept him here under strict instructions not to talk. Since I do remember what you did on your first day here, Hizashi." Hizashi just hung his head, a metaphorical dark cloud hanging above him as he sulked. From one of the beds, the curtains moved away and Midoriya poked his head out. Shota saw how the boy beamed and quickly made his way over to them, grinning. Hizashi, seeing the kid, brightened up. "Midoriya!" His husband bent down. "Can I hug you?" he asked. Midoriya nodded, and Hizashi swept the kid into a hug, and Shota caught his husband whispering to the kid of how happy he was, and that he promised to never break the trust Midoriya placed in him. Like the emotional kid Midoriya was, he started crying as he hugged Hizashi back. "Well, little listener, looks like I need to help you control your new quirk so you don't deafen your classmates like I did." Midoriya nodded and pointed to him. Hizashi looked at him and gave a confused look. Shota, of course, guessed that the kid was referring to the fact that some of the embarrassing stories involved Hizashi's quirk. "Or jumping down from a tree behind your bully and shouting with your quirk activated," Shota deadpanned. "Sho!" Hizashi whined. The group made their way to a small soundproof gym, otherwise known as Gym Sigma, and Shota headed into a smaller side room, which gave the output of sounds. He turned everything on, and the other room lit up with a white light. The light would go red if the noise was above safety levels, and green if it was good. He watched Hizashi, who was explaining it, the light green. Then he saw his husband turn towards the target, and the light turned red. Midoriya gave a thumbs up, and Shota saw his mouth move, and the light stayed red. Shota snorted as he saw the boy's surprised expression. Hizashi seemed to be amused by whatever the kid said, and ruffled Midoriya's hair. A couple minutes later, the red light went off for the first time while Midoriya spoke, and the kid beamed, saying something else, and the red light went back on. Shota saw Midoriya flush and look down, and his husband probably said something encouraging as the kid perked back up and continued to practice. An hour later, and the kid at least was getting an occasional green light. More often than not, it was red, but they also had to return the kid home, and so they cut off practice for today. Hizashi decided they would be driving the kid home. The kid grinned, giving a thumbs up, once more being silent as they went out of the room, and he didn't want to risk accidentally shouting. Shota sat in the back with Midoriya and started to teach Midoriya some basic hand signs. He would have to remember to bring in a book on sign language for Midoriya. Izuku was once again the first to arrive at the classroom, having taken the early train. A few minutes passed before Aizawa and Yamada entered. The voice hero was still in his civilian clothes. "Morning," Yamada greeted. Izuku smiled and waved, doing the sign Aizawa-sensei had taught him yesterday. "Hello," That and goodbye were the only 2 signs Aizawa had taught him in the time they had on the drive home. "This is for you, Midoriya," Aizawa said, handing over a book. He looked at the cover and saw it was a sign language book for beginners. Yamada-sensei gave a kiss to Aizawa and ruffled Izuku's hair before walking out to change into his hero uniform. "Midoriya," Aizawa called. Izuku looked to the teacher. "As I'm sure you know, Hisashi is very affectionate. If at any time you are uncomfortable, let him or me know. Hisashi will understand, all right? But you did make my husband ecstatic when you told him he didn't have to ask permission every time he wanted to give you a hair ruffle or a hug." Izuku nodded. He had given permission to Yamada yesterday during the training. Well, more like shouted it, but still. Izuku looked between the book and carefully spelled out letters, with Aizawa-sensei helping correct his positioning as he painstakingly asked, "Can you inform class that I won't be able to talk for a while?" Even though it took longer than writing it out, it would be good to practice. Especially since it was used a lot by underground heroes when they didn't want to run the risk of being heard. Aizawa nodded, and fingerspelled back slowly, letting Izuku look at the book to match up what he was making. "Yes, I will." About the time he finished figuring it out, Ida came in. "Good day, Sensei. Midoriya." Aizawa nodded in response. Aizawa made a sign. Good. Another sign. Morning. Izuku practiced them as Ida watched on in curiosity. He turned to the boy and did the signs, giving a hesitant smile. Ida gave a smile back and returned a good morning. "Are you learning sign language, Midoriya?" Izuku nodded, carefully spelling out, "Yes." "That's very good. I'll admit, I'm a bit rusty, but I do know fingerspelling and basics. I can help if you want," the speed boy offered. Izuku gave a thumbs up, nodding his head. "Did you lose your voice again?" "I will explain to the entire class why Midoriya is unwilling to talk," Aizawa spoke. Ida just nodded, and by this point a few more students had trailed into the room, so Izuku took his seat, which was next to Ida and Tokiyami, Koda having taken his spot behind Bakugo. Ida carefully started to fingerspell. "How are you today?" "I'm doing good," Izuku managed to spell back before the bell rang, not having to look at the book for a few of the letters. The 2 turned to the front, and Aizawa informed them that their offers were ready, and that they had until the end of the week to decide. Izuku already knew that he would be interning with Gran Torino to help with One for All. He just hoped that he had time to get voice a bit under control before then. "Right. One last note before I let you do what you want. Midoriya has ended up copying President Mike's voice quirk. As such, he needs to learn how to control it. He has chosen to stay silent during class so as to not accidentally injure us or our hearing." Then homeroom proceeded on for a little bit longer, until time ended and the rest of the classes started. During lunch, All Might came up to him, reminding him about the offer, and Izuku just nodded. "Oh, right, I almost forgot that Recovery Girl sent an email about you having copied President Mike's voice quirk, and that you were working to control it. Would you like to learn sign language, my boy?" Izuku beamed. "Aizawa is also helping," he sighed, pausing at one point to dig out the book, as he couldn't remember what the sign was for za. "Very good," All Might said, signing as he spoke. "I think most of the teachers know sign and would be willing to use it while they speak to help." "We do with the 2nd and 3rd years. Sign language is actually a requirement for 3rd years to start learning, but we start using it in 2nd for those who want to get a head start. Which is usually students who plan to go underground," Midnight said, grinning as she entered into the conversation, the entire time she was signing with her hands. Most of the meaning lost to Izuku, but he figured it was equal to what she was saying. "I'm learning fingerspelling and basics," Izuku spelled out, looking at the book a bit. "Ah, because of Mike's quirk, right?" Izuku nodded. "Anyways, Eraser sent me to hand you your internship papers now, and that you'd be spending your afternoon class period with Mike for control lessons," Midnight explained, reaching into a bag and pulling out some papers. "Thank you." Izuku put the papers in his bag and went to the cafeteria, eating a quick lunch as the lunch period was almost over, and then went to Yamada's classroom. Peeking through the window, he saw a sub there, so he started through the halls toward the gym, figuring that the hero would be waiting for him there. Turns out he was right, so he entered the room and the 2 continued on working to control his quirk, which was difficult as even when he had the quirk activated, he sounded like he was talking at a normal volume to himself and to Yamada, since the voice quirk gave them protection against loud noises. It made Izuku wonder if Bakugo had protection against the loud noises his explosions made. If not, then had his hearing been damaged? Izuku asked Yamada what he thought, watching how the light stayed red. That's certainly a possibility. I know that not all loud quirks include hearing protection. I know that I was quite lucky, actually, as I was born with my quirk. My parents, not so much. But if I hadn't had my ears to be able to protect themselves, then I would have been deaf before I reached one. My parents did lose their hearing, unfortunately. Uh, oh, Izuku said, not really knowing what else to say. I met your mother, but I don't know much about your father. May I know more about him? Izuku shrugged. I never met the guy before Mom's accident. She told me he worked overseas and provided for us. I don't even know his name. Yamada just nodded, giving a hum. What should I talk about? Izuku asked after a moment of not being able to think of anything to say. How about you tell me what you think of your classmates? Are you getting along with them? So Izuku proceeded to tell Yamada about his classmates, trying to keep his voice at a normal volume, and throughout his entire ramble the light flickered between red to occasionally a brief bit of green as he focused on lowering his voice into a normal volume. After his afternoon lesson with Yamada, Izuku went to meet with Snipe for his Wednesday lesson. Then he went home, Yamada and Aizawa being kind enough to drive him. Izuku much preferred being in the car with them than taking the train. Maybe he should see about getting a driver's license and his own car, though that was such a huge payment. And he didn't know if there was enough money to cover that kind of expense. He did the homework assigned, spent the rest of the evening practicing fingerspelling and other basic stuff that was in the introductory book. The next day, he once again took the early train and decided that would probably be his normal routine from then on. When he arrived, he saw Aizawa and Yamada already there, and the two teachers continued to help him with his JSL. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 27 of Little Acts of Kindness. Chapter 28 will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to this chapter, and as always, thank you so much for listening.